Need your daily fix on mixed martial arts?
We're going to kind of recap Bellator 155.
From UFC 198.
Who's who?
Kind of a controversial decision.
And who's not?
I couldn't figure out why, and then it hit me.
Well, don't you fret, because Golden State Media Concepts got you covered. Get your daily dose of MMA podcast. Everything from the UFC, Bellator Fighting Championship, Extreme Cage Fighting, Invicta Fighting Championship, and so much more. Join us as we talk about some of the biggest names in mixed martial arts. We've got you covered here on Golden State Media Concepts MMA Podcast.
All right. Thank you for tuning in to the Golden State Media Concepts Mixed Martial Arts Podcast. I'm your host, Tate. And today we are going to be covering UFC 203, which was quite an interesting card. The main event featured Stipe Miocic against Alistair Overeem, in which Stipe actually defended his title back in his hometown of Ohio. It was actually good for me to see Stipe actually pull off the win, considering I am a Northeast Ohio kid, grew up there, went to school at the University of Akron, and spent a lot of time in Cleveland. So it was really nice to see someone actually go back to Cleveland and really, showcase their skills and really showcase the city. And Stipe did just that. The fight between him and Alistair was full of fireworks and quite unbelievable. The card as a whole, on paper, it looked amazing. I think there was a lot of disappointing outcomes. I think a lot of the casual fan might not have been as happy with the results, but it was an interesting card nevertheless, and it actually raised a lot of new questions as far as the heavyweight division, what's going to happen there. So we're going to cover the main event. We're going to cover Fabricio Werdum versus Travis Brown. We're going to cover the CM Punk versus Mickey Gall fight, Uriah Favors fight, and then we're also going to talk about the two fights on the card as well, the two women's MMA fight where Jessica Andrade and Joanne Caldwood, they actually had a great fight, and that really changed the entire, that's gonna really change the strawweight, picture of who's gonna be contending for the title, because Jessica came in and she was so strong that I think a lot of people are gonna look at her now as, is she the biggest threat to Joanna's title now? And then there was another fight, Jessica Ai versus Badge Correa, and I think a lot of people in Ohio was very upset about that outcome as well, because Jessica Ai is from the area. Well, we're going to dive into all these fights and a little bit more when we come right back. Stay tuned.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now. Don't bother. What's hot on Netflix and everything in between. That's gsmcpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
All right, we're back, and now we're going to talk about the main event. Actually, we're not going to talk about the main event. Normally, we cover the main event first, but In this particular case, the main event and the co-main event, which are great stories, but I really want to start off by talking about the Mickey Gall CM Punk fight. Mainly because this fight was the fight that a lot of people were really curious about, which featured a young kid who no one had really ever seen, Mickey Gall, who has been training a big part of his life to become an MMA, a professional fighter. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt. He had 2 fights. This was going to be his 3rd fight. But he was actually fighting CM Punk, which is a WWE superstar, former WWE champion. And the fight ended up being for CM Punk, it was a massive disappointment because of the fact that Mickey Gall came in and he demolished CM Punk. And, when this fight was first announced, I've always followed the WWE, and I've been a wrestling fan for quite a while, but I was never a CM Punk fan. I didn't like his character. I always thought he just didn't seem like a guy that I really wanted to follow, and I was once upon a time a huge wrestling fan. But after the fight was announced and they started showing, CM Punk was being interviewed and they showed the embedded, CM Punk actually won me over. I realized that, a lot of times when you see people on TV, they're not quite the character that they are in real life. And I watched CM Punk and I watched him, and he was a very famous guy, but he was actually at heart a really great person. And, just a very humble guy who was just really trying to make the most of his life. And he didn't want anything to hold him back. And one of the things he's always wanted to do was to try his hand at mixed martial arts. And I admired that because I've kind of lived that same approach where it's one of those situations where never let somebody tell you can't do something, or never, you don't want to look back on your life and say, you know what? I wish I would have tried this, but I was too afraid. And so I admired him for what he did. Now, as everyone knows, the fight didn't quite turn out the way CM Punk had hoped. Once the bell sounded, and CM came to the ring very confident. And when the bell sounded, he came in really fast. He came over and he charged at Mickey Gall incredibly fast, which I thought was a giant mistake. But I think he was trying, what his game plan was to, jump on him before, the kind of throw him off guard a little bit. But it actually backfired. Mickey, who is a fighter at heart, he's been trained his whole life to become a UFC fighter. So just natural instincts came in. He swept under him, hit him with a double leg, took him down. And the minute that CM Punk hit the ground, I knew the fight was over. And I had hoped, from talking to other people and talking to some of the experts, everyone had kind of agreed that most people didn't see the fight lasting longer than 2 or 3 minutes. And the fight was just that. It was just, once he got to the ground, CM Punk was just annihilated. And it was unfortunate because he never really had a chance to show his skills. The main reason why I wanted to talk about this fight is kind of the aftermath. And CM Punk was a classy guy afterwards. And he's showed everything that he has this whole way through this experience has been nothing but class. And like I told you, I was not a CM Punk wrestling fan. And so the fact that he won me over is saying something. But he did. He was, even afterwards, he was a very classy guy. He was a gracious loser. He gave encouraging words to Mickey Gall about, believing in himself. And I admired that. Now, after this, you see, I've been listening to a lot of the experts, and they're talking about this fight. And a lot of people are saying, he shouldn't come back. He's done. He should have never even tried this. And I understand where this comes from because his first performance was so bad. But I have a different take on this. The first thing is, a lot of people don't remember Brock Lesnar's first fight, but I do. And Brock Lesnar tapped out his first fight. But a lot of people, and now history has moved on, and everyone's forgotten about the fact that, his first fight in the UFC, Brock Lesnar tapped out. There's nothing wrong with tapping out. I personally think that this fight was set up for failure for CM Punk. Not that there was a conspiracy to make CM Punk look bad or anything. I just think it was set up wrong that it was made to not showcase CM Punk because of the way things was set up. And the reason why I say this is meaning this. Mickey Gall was a guy who was striving to become a UFC fighter, and normally a guy who's trying to become a UFC fighter, they was founded by Dana White looking for a fight. Those guys, they train, they're trying to become a fighter. They're training 2 to 4 days a week as they're homing their skills in, getting ready to find a fight. But in Mickey Gall's case, he was given his opponent 6-7 months in advance. So he knew that not only was he going to be showcased with one of the biggest stars in professional wrestling, but it was going to be on a major pay-per-view event. So Mickey Gall had a situation where instantly he became the focal point of his gym. Instead of going to the gym and training 3-4 days a week, now you're going to the gym because you're going to be on the main card of one of the biggest events in the UFC. So now you have a guy who's training 3-4 hours a day. Now it becomes his career, and he's training every day, 8-10 hours a day, preparing for this fight. Now, Mickey Gall is a great fighter, and I don't know if great may be a little rough of a word, but he is one of those guys who has the potential to be a star in the UFC. He's young, he's learning, but this fight against CM Punk really fast-tracked his skills because he was able to get the training in the time that most gyms wouldn't normally give a guy as he's up and coming, because he was that main card guy. So his skills as a young guy, his skills advanced so much further than like CM Punk, who had never really had a professional combat fight in his career. So, Mickey Gall already had a head start, and then he was all of a sudden going to get a big jump in training as well, where CM Punk was dealing with injuries and just learning the business. So it was a bad matchup for him. I just didn't think it was the right decision to announce that that Mickey Gall was going to be fighting him. I think, a lot of the sports writers are saying, should CM Punk fight again? And most say no. I say yes. One, the way I understand, he has a multi-fight deal with UFC. And the fact of the matter is, he went in against a guy who had been training really hard. The guy took him down, and he lost. But he never had a chance. CM Punk never had a chance to truly showcase his skills. So I think he deserves one more fight where he's going to fight a guy that's not going to be preparing, 8-9 months to fight CM Punk. Put him in there against a guy that's not a jiu-jitsu guy, but put him in there against someone that he can get a chance to showcase what he has. Now, if he gets crushed and beaten, then maybe it's time to hang it up. But by looking at this fight and just saying one fight, he should be done, I disagree with everyone. I think he deserves a second shot at showcasing his skills, and I think he'll be a much better fighter for this. As far as Mickey Gall goes, he ended up calling out Sage Northcutt. And at first, I kind of rolled my eyes by this. I'm like, really? Everyone calls out Sage. Everyone disrespect Sage, and I don't know why, but a lot of people do. But then I thought about it, and I started listening to Mickey Gall and what he was saying, and he's right. This is the perfect fight for Sage and Mickey Gall. They're both guys who were founded by the show Dana White Looking for a Fight. They both have a big name now because of this fight with CM Punk. Mickey Gall is a name now. Sage Northcutt is a name. They're both young. They're both in the same weight class. Everything works out. I think this is a perfect fight. I even love the whole concept of fighting in New York because Mickey Gall's a New York guy. I think it's a perfect matchup, and I would listen to an interview where Dana agreed that this would be a good matchup for these guys. So it looks like this is going to happen, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. Now, this concludes my take on the CM Punk fight and Mickey Gall and the outcome of here. When we come back, we're going to talk about the main event and the co-main event. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
All right, and we're back, and we just got done covering the CM Punk Mickey Gall fight, and I gave you my take on how things went down and where I think the future is, what the future will be for Mickey Gall and for CM Punk. Now we're going to talk about the main event, and you know what? The main event, in my opinion, saved this card. There was a lot of fights that were kind of less than spectacular. There was a lot of fights that didn't quite the person who the casual fan would know. That person didn't really win. It was more the person that the casual fan would not know won the fights on a number of them, and so there was a lot of disappointment, and some of the fights were a little boring. But not the main event. The main event delivered, and I mean it delivered big time. You had Ohio's own Stipe Miocic against Alistair Overeem, which is one of the most decorated MMA fighters in the history. And these guys came out and they started firing. And, you know, both guys got nailed right out the gate very fast. I was kind of surprised at the approach that Alistair came in with, which was, I was expecting Alistair to kind of get in, stick and move, and he was trying to do some of that. And I figured that that Stipe would do more of a counter punch kind of strategy, and it was some of that. But the fact of the matter is that this fight was going on, and Alistair nailed Stipe, and Stipe dropped, and instead of doing, and this was the biggest mistake of the entire fight, was instead of jumping on him and firing shots to finish him off, which I think most fighters would do. This is one of the things that some Brazilian jiu-jitsu guys and wrestlers will do, the opposite of that, which is they'll nail a guy, they'll get him stunned, and then they'll jump on him and they'll try to submit him. And that's exactly what Alistair did. He nailed Stipe dropped, and then he tried to put him in a guillotine. And he actually had him in a guillotine, but he couldn't hold it. and Stipe was able to escape. And we'll talk a little bit more about that because there's more that comes out of this this whole situation. But I don't like going for, if you nail a guy and you have him dazed, keep firing shots. Don't go for the submission, because the submission, as the fighter is trying to not get submitted, as you're trying to submit a fighter, you're giving a fighter a chance to get their head right and get the cobwebs out. So, and that's exactly what happened. Instead, it was a flash knockdown. He went for the guillotine. He couldn't pull the guillotine off, but it gave Stipe enough time to get his head right so that he was back in the fight. Where with a flash knockdown, normally there's enough time that if you follow up a flash knockdown with another hard shot or two, this fight is over. And I truly thought this fight would have been over if he'd have came with a solid shot afterwards instead of the guillotine. But in this particular case, he went for the submission. Stipe was able to get out of the submission and get up, which then set up a situation where it looked like Alistair slipped and Stipe got over top. He threw a couple of ground and pound shots that really just nailed Alistair, and Alistair was out. He nailed him with 3 shots that his head actually bounced like it was a basketball. And Alistair was out, and then the crowd went wild. And I loved being from Ohio. It sometimes makes you feel proud when he jumped up on the fence, and he did the OH. And then because there was so much excitement over what was going on, people didn't catch on. So when he came back down and Joe Rogan went to go interview him, the first thing he did before Joe Rogan could get a word out, he snatched the microphone from Joe Rogan and he yells out OH, and the whole crowd just yells back IO, and then he yells again OH, and everyone says IO, and it was just amazing. And you know, the UFC hadn't come to Cleveland, and the fights that had happened in Columbus and Cincinnati were very, very disappointing. So Cleveland came in, they showed up, that fight was sold out. It was, all the events were sold out. This was a spectacular event to showcase the city of Cleveland, which I always thought Cleveland would be a great UFC town, and they really showed that. But the fans were really behind Stipe. Stipe was a class act this whole time, and he actually broke one of my golden rules, which is, if you're a champion, don't go home and fight. And it almost came true, because Alistair almost knocked him out, but he actually survived that, and he was actually able to go in and win. And so, it really sets up what's next for Stipe, and we're going to talk about that next. But before we talk about that, I wanted to talk about when they interviewed Alistair, and Alistair was talking about how, when he had him in the guillotine, he felt like Stipe tapped. And they went back and they looked, and they saw that there was no tap there. And I could see how, maybe he got a little confused, maybe got confused, and maybe the hand when they were jostling for hands. But Joe Rogan brought up a good point. A lot of times when a fighter gets knocked out, there's a lot of things that go on. One, your mind's not thinking straight. Number 2, your pride has been crushed. You've been trained a long time, and so a lot of times, not thinking straight and your pride being hurt, you can say some things that may not have been as true, or in your mind as true, but may not be reality. And so I like that Joe Rogan brought up the fact that he doesn't think the UFC should interview fighters right after they've been knocked out, because it's one of those things where fighters aren't not at their peak, mental abilities at that point in time. And so I do think that UFC should think about that, because Alistair, I think if you interviewed Alistair now, I think he would have a different take on what happened in this event. Now, as I was just saying, what's next? what's next is, they're trying to decide on for Stipe who we fight next. You have Fabricio, who we're going to talk about in a few seconds, and we have Cain Velasquez, the two former champions. First off, you have Cain Velasquez, who crushed Travis Brown and looked impressive. And then you also have Fabricio Werdum. I personally think it's going to be Cain Velasquez. I think he deserves the rematch. I think he deserves the fight. He lost his title to Fabricio because he was in Brazil. The high altitude, he didn't train in Brazil in the high altitude, and it really affected him, and he gassed out. But other than that, Cain has been one of maybe the strongest UFC champion we've had, and so as far as heavyweights go, and so I think he deserves the title shot next. Also, when we're talking about here the Fabricio Travis Brown fight. First off, Cain Velasquez looked a lot better against Travis Brown. And so I think he deserves it. Now, talking about Fabricio against Travis Brown, this was an interesting fight. And I think the referees kind of became a factor in this fight, and that's the disappointing thing. Because of the fact that the fight started off amazing, because the bell sounded and Fabricio did a flying kick which nailed Travis Brown in the face. It was like, I don't know if you were to like Bloodsport or one of those movies. He did a flying kick, which kicked him right in the face. It was something I've never seen in any UFC fight. It was so amazing. But then from there, the fight went on, and Fabricio was trying to showcase his skills, but he was being very cautious. He threw an overhand right in which Travis Brown tried to block with his hand. And unfortunately, Travis Brown broke his hand, broke his finger, so bad that the bone came through his index finger. I believe it was his index finger. It was, but the bone actually came through, and so Travis turned, as in like he broke it. His hands hurt. He goes to the referee. Fabricio goes over to hit him, but the referee doesn't stop it. He turns away. The referee stops the fight to look at his hand, and they let the fight. They literally stop the fight and then have them keep fighting. They kind of broke the rules there, because if a fighter turns and says he doesn't want to fight anymore or discontinues the fight, there should not have been a stoppage for a broken finger. It's either, and if they're going to stop it because of broken finger, the fight is over and Fabricio wins by a first round knockout. But they actually stopped the fight. They looked at the finger and then let the fight go on, which it should not have happened. As a whole, Fabricio, he won all 3 rounds. It was a very easy win. Travis Brown actually looked really, really bad. I don't want to beat up on Travis Brown as much as some other people does, because of the fact that, his last couple fights has not looked good. I think the finger had a big part in that. The fact that, if you look down at your finger and your bone's coming out of your finger, that will mess you up a little bit. And I think that had a little factor on why Travis Brown didn't look so good. So, but anyway, Fabricio won with ease. Fabricio has stated that he really wants a title shot and deserves a title shot, because he had 6 straight wins before he lost to Stipe, and he wants a rematch. And if it wasn't for the fact that Cain Velasquez is sitting there, I would agree. But in my opinion, Cain Velasquez and then Fabricio. Now, after the fight, one of the trainers for Travis Brown was yelling and cussing at Fabricio, and then you actually see Fabricio actually throw a push kick, which then pushes that trainer back, which was, and they had to separate all the trainers and everything. But that was an interesting thing too. You don't normally see a situation where a fighter actually kicks a trainer, but that actually happened. The UFC looked into it, and they found that the trainer was, kind of saying some things to Fabricio about Fabricio's mom. And so they decided there was no discipline that was going to happen. And I think that was a smart decision on the UFC part. So, on the co-main event, like I said, we have Fabricio winning a unanimous decision, which I had at 3-0. So we've already covered what happened with the title fight. We've covered CM Punk, and we've also covered the co-main event. Now we're going to talk about Uriah Faber versus Jimmy Rivera. And I was looking forward to seeing this fight. But when I was watching it, Jimmy Rivera was he was like bigger and he was stronger. And it was kind of sad for me to see this because, Jimmy Rivera won a unanimous decision over Uriah Faber. And a lot of people are saying, does this mean Uriah Faber is done? I don't necessarily think Uriah Faber is done, but I do think of him as being done in the bantamweight division. It's not. I just feel like the fighters are just a little too big and a little too strong for Uriah, and that's why he's lost. He's lost a couple of fights. He was the number 2 contender fighting the number 10 contender, and he ended up losing. Jimmy Rivera, this is a really great opportunity because he actually gets a big name on his resume of someone that he beat, and it's going to open up a lot of doors for him. But I don't think it's necessarily the end of Uriah Faber unless he decides that he wants to be done. And that's very possible because he was thinking about giving it up. But I think that Uriah I would love to see Uriah step down and go down in weight because a lot of these fighters are a lot bigger. Uriah goes down in weight. He's that guy that could really become a much stronger fighter. I think he could cause a lot of damage if he went down. And I think he could make one more run at the title. But as a whole, seeing Uriah lose this fight was a little disappointing. But it was an interesting fight there. Okay, when we come back, we're going to talk about the two women's MMA fight that went on. Both were very interesting, and both have some interesting impact on the future of the women's mixed martial arts division. When we come back, we'll talk more about that.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we're back. And we've been covering UFC 203. And we started off by talking about the CM Punk Mickey Gall fight. Then we just recapped the championship fight, which was Alistair Overeem losing to the champ Stipe Miocic by first round knockout. We had Fabricio Werdum winning a 3-round unanimous decision over Travis Brown. Travis Brown ended up breaking his finger with the bone coming through so that was kind of gruesome. And then we also talked about kind of a disappointing fight where Uriah Faber lost a unanimous decision to Jimmy Rivera. Now, we're going to close out today's show by talking about a couple of fights that were on the undercard here. And the first one we're going to talk about is the main event on the prelims, which was Jessica Ai versus Bej Correa. And Jessica Ai being from Ohio and being from Cleveland, this was a big deal for her. And you could tell when she was coming out to the ring, she had this strut to her that she wanted to really showcase her skills. And Bej coming off of 2 disappointing losses, Bej really needed this fight. Well, in the first round, this was a fight where I feel like Jessica put everything out and tried to showcase everything, and she was really excited. And in my opinion, she clearly won that first round. But I felt like she was proud of herself by what she had did in that first round, that she put out effort, but not as much effort as Bedge did. I thought Bedge dug down deep. She fought hard, and she won, close round in the second round. And then in the third round, I feel like Jessica actually put out even less of an effort, where Bedge was kept on putting out effort more and more. I actually scored the fight 2 rounds to Bedge, 1 round to Jessica I, and I know a lot of people in Cleveland were very upset. I know that some of the experts thought that it was a closer fight than it was. But, when you look at when the scorecard came in and it was a split decision, 1 judge had it for Jessica I and 2 judges had it for Bedge, I thought it was the right decision. Now, if I thought if Jessica I would have put in more effort, I think she would have won. I think she'd have won the fight easy. But I don't know what was going on, but I think she thought she was doing better than she was. I think maybe hearing the crowd and how much the crowd was cheering for her, I think might have thrown off how well she thought. It kind of showed her that she was doing better than what she thought she was doing. As a whole, I thought it really cost her. And so she ended up losing, which really knocks her way down as far as like completely out of the picture. And it really actually kind of rights the ship for Bedge, who came off of 2 losses. One of the losses everyone knows is the one against Ronda Rousey. But it kind of rights her ship, and so she can actually get back into being a contender again. She's not in the place where she can get a title shot, but she's now in a place where she can actually get a little bit of a bigger name fighter to come up next. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with Bedge in the next few months or so. Now, the final fight I want to talk about is Jessica Andrade versus Joanne Calderwood. Now, Joanna had just came off of a very big win, and she was kind of setting herself up for, is she going to be one of the people that's going to be contending for the title? And then you had Jessica, who was coming down to the strawweight division, mainly because she was the bantamweight division. The fighters were a little too strong for her, and she was a good fighter, but she wasn't a great fighter in that bantamweight division. Guys, she dropped weight and she got to that strawweight division, and she looks amazing. Her strength, she was so strong in this fight. I've never seen a fighter with that big of a difference in strength. She was able to pick up Joanne and slam her down. She was able to do a lot of things. She was able to really overpower a very good strawweight fighter. And actually, Joanne is actually one of the bigger strawweight fighters, and she was just able to be just way too strong, way too powerful for her. And all of a sudden, she looks so impressive that now there's a lot of people wondering, is she the person that's going to give Joanna a real challenge? Because you're going to have the power of Jessica versus the sheer skill and speed of Joanna Jędrzejczyk. And a lot of people are saying that should be the next fight. I don't know if that should be the next fight, but that is a fight that people should keep an eye on, because that is a fight that Joanna's going to have to have. It may not be Joanna's next fight, but the fight after that just may be Jessica Andrade versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk. And I would be one person that would line up to see that fight. That is a very interesting fight. I think we're going to have a fight in Poland first, and if Joanna gets through that, then the next fight I think will be Jessica Andrade. So I'm looking forward to that. But as a whole, this was a really great card. I enjoyed it. And the UFC has been running off fight after fight each week, and so I'm really looking forward to seeing all the fights that are coming up. I know that, on a side note, I know we've been not around the last few weeks just because there's been a number of things that have been going on at the office here that has taken my attention away from the show. But I will be back next week to cover the UFC on Fox card. And then I will be covering all the other cards that are coming up. So with that, which is going to wrap up our program, thank you for tuning in. And I'll see you guys next week. Thank you.